Sound on.
Oh, no. I don't have any YouTube.
Hey, Matt.
Are we live?
Hey, Matt. You're live.
I know, but
don't
I
even
can't
have
say
YouTube.
anything because news of her talking.
Say it.
That's right. You heard me right.
You did it on Facebook.
Brian,
We used
we're
to.
having a show.
Oh, hey.
We'll tell you what's happening. We'll
Yeah.
tell you what's happening.
We are back, and we do have a. I don't see a light on any camera. There it is, Jeff.
I put it on new while he was messing with his phone.
We are back, and we do have a special episode tonight for a lot of different reasons. So the topic tonight, which we will dive into here shortly, is breaking down the dog days of summer. And Thrift had a great idea. And
It's rare, but it happened.
he had a great idea. He said that we're all going to break down our strengths during the summer. So New is going to talk about shallow fishing in the summer, chasing those shallow water fish. Thrift's going to talk about the offshore game, and I'm going to talk about schooling fish because that was all that was left over to talk about. And Matt sucks at the rest of them. So, so that's what we're going to do for y'all tonight.
The reason I threw schooling fish on you is because every Forest Wood Cup that I can remember, it seemed like Matt was always on schooling fish. He was always catching schooling fish.
But I catch him the first day, and then well, we'll talk about that though. We'll talk about that
Right.
because schooling fish can be can definitely ruin your tournament, or they can make your tournament. They're a lot more. I like them a lot more when it's a 1-day tournament than a 3 or 4 day. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. So. Live chat tonight. Don't forget, we're on YouTube, y'all. Obviously, anybody that's on here, but anybody that's still trying to search for us or find us, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel because we've made this transition several months back from Facebook to YouTube. We've had a great turnout, and we do appreciate all the support, but a lot of people are saying, how do we engage? How do we watch live? Make sure everybody knows that this is on YouTube now. So our YouTube channel, be sure to get on there. Another giveaway tonight, sponsored by Lunker Text, and I'm just going to show y'all. It's right here. Just so y'all know, this is what you're going to win.
A whole plethora of stuff.
That's what you're going to win. And that is, what is it, Tyler, Jeff? Like a lot.
A bunch of stuff.
Like $150.
Like I'm
worth
watching
of
the live feed.
I just zoomed in on it.
Luckily, you dumped it completely out of the camera
I
view.
just zoomed in.
Oh,
Did I
there
really?
we go.
Oh,
Jeff fixed
yeah.
it. Jeff fixed it.
Jeff's got this. Oh, there you go, Jeff. I see it now. Attaboy.
job,
So
Jeff.
there's all kinds of good. There's actually some Lunker Hunt fetches. There's all kinds of bass catchers. There's missile
I see
baits
a
in
couple
there.
top waters in there.
There's booyah, deep diving cranks. There's swim baits. Oh, there's like 4 or 5 rod gloves in there. Everybody needs more rod gloves. All kinds of goodies. We'll give away at the end of the show during our trivia question. But let's talk real quick about Angler's Choice Marine because they are the presenting sponsor of this show. And for how many years? Over three years.
Over three.
Over 3 years
maybe
now.
4 years.
And I know we talk about this, but they deserve all the credit because without them, we wouldn't have all this fancy equipment. Would we, Jeff?
Not a lot of it.
Not a lot of it. He's a man of many words.
We'd still be on Facebook.
Yeah, we still be on Facebook too. That's right. So big shout out to Angler's Choice Marine. They've always they've been behind Thrift and I for years, and they are a great sponsor.
Great dealership. I was just up at the Spindale location the other day checking out all the new stuff. Got all the new Tracker Off-Road, new Rangers, Tritons, everything you want. Plus, the tackle stores come along very nicely at the Spindale location. Martinsville has got the tackle on lock, but they're starting to expand that at Spindale. Remember, they have 3 great dealerships, Martinsville, Virginia, Lexington, North Carolina, and Spindale, North Carolina. And they'll cover you for whatever you need.
Yeah, and that's what Thrift mentioned, the tackle selection.
I'm actually going to the Martinsville store tomorrow
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
What you headed up there for?
to actually drop my old boat off, or not, I say my old boat. I'm going to Martinsville to take my 2021 Ranger to be sold by Angler's Choice Marine. So if you're in the market for my boat
So it's
from
available.
last year, it will be available in a day or two. I'm going to drop it off. I'm actually going fishing offshore, and I'm going to drop the boat off on the way. Fully rigged, got the Minn Kota Raptors, 4 Helix Graphs, Minn Kota Mega Live, 360, everything you want, the way I like to fish, and Angler's Choice will have it for sale shortly.
And it's got the smell of bait fuel on it,
And the smell of bait fuel.
Well, there is no smell.
which has no smell. Ha ha! Got him. No,
Actually, the smell of bait fuel is bass,
and money.
Yes.
because it puts the bass in the
I
boat.
saw the boy. Ron Salzman, who won y'all's last event on Watts Bar,
Right.
was actually he talking about how big of a key player that was for him. I know he was throwing a drop shot a lot. He was throwing a little swim bait, I think, but had it all soaked up in bait fuel.
Oh, yeah.
I
And
tell
I-
you what's funny. Go ahead.
No, finish.
What's funny is, I've seen, and I'm sure y'all have too, but you see a lot of comments like reviews and stuff on bait fuel in different places across the internet, and people thinking it's a gimmick. And it kind of sucks for bait fuel, but for me, I kind of like it. Cause, I mean, they think it's just a gimmick, and it's definitely not, because it definitely works.
Now, like I've seen, and I know I said on the show after our first event this year at Darbone, what made me a dead set believer in it, because I'll admit, I was skeptical at first. Like, I was. I mean, you've got a scent that has no scent. You got to be skeptical. You got to question it a little bit. That's the human nature. But at Darbone, I was fishing shallow stump flats, and I saw 4 fish on my Humminbird Mega Live beside a stump, and I was throwing a shaky head, and I made 10 or 12 casts at them from 50 feet away. I had my Raptors down. I wasn't moving. Never got a bite. Took bait fuel, put it on the very same worm, didn't change worms, didn't change colors, didn't change anything. The only thing I did was put bait fuel on that worm, and I caught 2 2-pounders on the next 2 casts back to back. There's no doubt in my mind that that's the reason those fish bit. I don't think it's a cure-all and you're just going to blister them everywhere you go because of it, but I definitely think it helps you get more bites day in and day out.
Well, that's the bottom line. People think they get the wrong impression of certain things in our industry, and you hear pros
There's no
talk about
magic
it.
wand to anything.
Correct.
No, there's no
Correct.
magic wand.
But the point is, like New just said, there's no magic formula. But anything that helps you get an extra bite, if you're a tournament angler, it's worth every penny.
Right, even if it's only 1 or 2 bites a day.
Yeah.
Like,
That could
think
be the
about
one
one-
bite that wins.
Right, and when
Yeah.
you're thinking about the course of a year, especially where points are involved, like the 3 of us, I mean, if it gets you 2 more fish at an event, I mean, you're talking about the 50, 60, maybe 100 points throughout the course of the year. I mean, that could be the difference in,
Angler of the year,
making a
not making-
championship,
yeah.
not making a championship, making the classic, not making the classic.
Yeah.
So it could make a big difference when you think about it in the long range, long-term deal.
I've got several similar situations to that, but one in particular at Fork this year, I really only had 2 or 3 schools of fish that I was mainly fishing, and but the one school in particular, I think it was the second day I pulled up, and literally in 15 minutes, it was actually only about 6 casts, but it took 15 minutes between weighing them and releasing them and all that mess, and retying. But I mean, I caught 2 7s, one almost 7, and a 5.5 that quick. But kind of fast forward to the third day, it wasn't nothing like that. It wasn't nearly that easy. I'm sitting there looking at the fish on my 360, and I had caught a fish or 2 that morning, but I went 30 minutes without a bite. I was throwing a football head, shaky head with a Magnum trick worm, in 20 minutes with that, not a bite. Literally on live, sat down, put bait fuel on my trick worm, and caught one. Like the first cast after throwing it for, 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, Mike Harris said nobody on BBC likes bait fuel, and I'm sure there's some people, but they probably started a thread on there. Whether it was, you never know where that stuff comes from when it's the internet. It could be like a paid
Yeah, who
enemy.
knows? I mean, I can tell you this.
Well,
But that
I
being
don't know
said-
if I'd say a paid enemy, but it doesn't matter what you've got. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be
Somebody's
the
gonna be a
greatest thing
hater.
in the world, and there's always going to be a core group of people or a couple of people that's just not happy with it.
And here's the thing: we're speaking through our experience. We do this for a living full time. We're not going to put a bunch of stuff on our plastics that we don't think help. Period.
Right.
And you could say, well, they get paid to say that or whatever. But the bottom line is we have to catch fish, and if it helps us catch fish, we're going to use it. If it doesn't, we're not.
Yeah.
So there you go.
And if you're watching this, you like to catch fish, so don't
Yeah.
you want to catch more fish?
100%.
I mean, honestly though, if you don't know, if you're skeptical, I mean, it's $10. I think, and I think that's the retail.
$9.99 a bottle, I believe. Yep.
So spend $10 and try it yourself. If you don't like it, that's $10 you never have to spend again. But
Yeah.
I promise
And the good
you,
thing
it's worth
about
a
it, if
try.
it makes some bites, you don't have to run all over the lake and burn $5 a gallon gas.
Yeah.
Think about it that way. You can save you gas money.
So Jimmy Absher, we've talked about this a little bit, but going back to bait fuel, he said, "Are y'all soaking the soft plastics in the bag or adding it in a tough situation?" I personally, like if I know I'm gonna be fishing, like at Pickwick, for example, I was fishing a lot of soft plastics, whether it was Nico rigging, drop shotting, nail weighting, whatever. I was soaking them that morning before the event. I was putting them in a bag and I was adding some bait fuel to it. I don't know. I can't answer for New and Brian. How do y'all do it?
I both, but I honestly I see myself adding it throughout the day.
Yeah.
More than the soaking.
Especially, I mean, well, obviously, if you're switching to a new bag of plastics or something,
Yeah.
you know, too. But if there's something you know you'll be using a lot of,
Yeah.
I'll put a little bit in there right before blast off,
Yeah.
and just kind of take it and just kind of mix it up just like that right there, and making sure it coats all the baits good, and then I'll use that as long as I can throughout the day. I'll add
Yeah.
some more baits to the pack too, you know. So
Yeah.
But how about you, Thrift?
I do the same thing. I'll obviously doctor the pack of baits up the night before, but then I also add it to the bait throughout the day when I'm using it too. So like if I make 10 or 15 casts, I'll add a little more. Make 10 or 15 casts, add a little more to the bait. Like I keep it fresh on there.
Yeah.
All right, I'm not familiar with this. Y'all probably are because y'all buy way more tackle than I do. But Jimmy
remind my
Absher
wife.
says it's $8.99 at Discount Tackle right now. So
There
that's
you go.
that's the cheapest I've heard.
Yeah,
for
me
bait
too.
fuel.
Yeah.
All right.
On to the topic.
Did you post a picture of a catfish today or something?
Yeah, I got catfished.
Yeah.
Somebody
We actually caught
Ryan
two
Sowers
catfish.
just-
We both got catfish today.
Yeah.
Y'all are throwing something smelly. That's all I can say. Y'all
maybe.
throwing something smelly.
Maybe.
Of course, I mean catfish, but I did catch one like a 6-pounder on a glide bait at Fork too. So.
Oh, man, I
catfish.
don't.
And it knocked it out like it was just under the surface, and it like porpoised it, like knocked it out of the water and missed it. Like
I've caught them on a buzzbait before.
it's catfish will eat anything.
Yeah, they
Bottom
will.
line is it might not
They
have been
will.
something smelly, but all right, let's dive into our topic. So we are talking about breaking down the dog days of summer. Everybody's experiencing it around the country right now. We got some pretty warm days ahead of us. We have some warm days behind us. We have hot water. Thrift just got up and walked out. You okay over there?
He'll be fine. He'll be fine.
Did I make you mad, New?
Possibly.
Okay. Well, it's good. Thrift walked out for a second. But New's going to start this topic. And like I said, if you missed the beginning of the show, it's going to be really good. Oh, I know where he went. I just heard this door shut. We talked about breaking down dog days of summer. New's actually going to dive into shallow water fishing. And you can talk about whatever you want, but talk about kind of where to find them and then your go-to approach and things like that. But he's going to talk about shallow water fishing in the summertime. So
All right.
questions, I'll read the questions. I'll try to shoot them over to you. And New, it's all you.
Well, this is kind of cool because honestly, I haven't even thought about this in a couple of years for the most part because typically our schedules don't line up for this kind of fishing.
That's true.
And I mean, I don't fish a whole lot around the house because it costs so much, and I'm working or trying to keep my old lady happy when I'm at home. So, but anyways, that's growing up North Carolina, Wiley, Norman. That's kind of the deal is burning the bank, catching cruisers. People talk about topwater fishing, shallow, and a lot of times that's what it is. But at the end of the day, they're really most of the time, at least 80% of those fish are cruisers, whether it's a wolf pack or a one-man wolf pack, like what was his name, Alan. But
What are you talking about?
if you don't know, you don't know.
Well, I got a question about your cruisers I'm not a question, just asking you to dive in to a little bit more about when you say cruisers. So people get, we talk about brim bed fish all the time, but talk about the wolf packs that are always moving, but they stay shallow too.
Well, and this is debatable, but we kind of come back to the brim bed. Remember that brim bed.
Yes,
But
sir.
like the cruising stuff, typically it's on the flatter stuff. Not going to say you won't see one on a seawall, on a steeper bank, but typically it's the flatter banks. Somewhere that's got a little bit of shade is always good. What? I just seen a look.
No, I was looking at the comment. You look at the camera, forget about me.
It's weird looking at the camera.
First of all, lean back forward because
Oh,
nobody can hear you. No, keep him straight, Thrift. We got to keep him straight.
But so one thing I
I
definitely
must
try
have
to
missed a
do.
lot when I went to the restroom.
You must have what?
I'm seeing a lot of comments. I must have missed a lot.
I'm not seeing anything.
No.
I
ain't
see
seen
a
anything.
thrift and a man in a cloud. But anyway,
I mean, I went to the bathroom, so
He just had to pee, y'all.
I
That's
thought we were
it.
talking about cruisers.
We are.
So, we have a lot of docks in the Carolinas. And that's one thing I like to avoid because if you're on a flat bank,
can't be as efficient.
yeah, if there's a lot of docks, one, it slows you down, and two, there's a whole lot of places for those fish to hide. So if it's just a flat bank with, one tree that hangs, not necessarily lay down, but one tree that hangs over and makes some shade, like chances are they're going to cruise down that bank. When they get to that one little spot of shade, you throw your old buzz bait up there and,
Now, talk about the flat bank situation because there's, a lot of different variables to that. Like, how far off the bank are you? What kind of depth range are you looking for the boat to be in? Whatever distance you are off the bank.
I think from lake to lake, it varies somewhat, because on one lake, flat might be deeper than flat on another lake. But let's just, I keep saying North Carolina because I live in South Carolina now. But Norman and Wiley, it seems like you keep that boat in 5 foot or less typically. And the farther the flat comes out from the bank, it really broadens what you're fishing. It's good stuff. It's just a lot bigger target. It's harder to fish it efficiently. So I definitely like the stuff that's flat but doesn't stick out real far from the bank. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Maybe. But anyways, that situation's like top water and a jig, swimming a jig. That's really about what I do. I mean, I throw a Zoom horny toad. I throw a buzz bait, like greenfish toad toter buzz bait with a horny toad on the back, some sort of walking bait, and a popper and a jig. That's about what I throw. That's about it.
In your experience, wolf packs, summertime wolf packs, are you thinking more creek-related flat stuff or main lake-related flat stuff? If you had to pick one or the other.
Ooh, that's a good
I like.
question.
I just made it. That's my
That's a good question.
Chris.
No, that's a really good question.
100% they use both. I like main lake better because, and this is just my theory, and it's 100% theory. I have
We'll tell you if it's right or
no
wrong.
way to back it up. But the more wide open, big, deep water there is, I feel like the less pressured the fish are because they have a lot more area that they can go and get away from everything, from boat traffic to waves crashing the bank to people fishing them. I like to be close to that. And that's no matter what I'm doing throughout the year. I like to be in that kind of situation. Now, some lakes have these great big giant creeks, which is big enough to be considered a lake. I mean,
So what's your definition for the viewers of a giant creek? Like
You
give
want
a-
a lot of open water.
I want a lot of open water.
He
Give
wants
them
a
deep
lot
water.
of open water. Like you don't want to be in a narrow creek where you can throw to both sides of it. You want to be in an open area where, you're on the bank, but you've got
like a big
200,
Allison.
300, 400 yards of open water
A
behind
Davidson.
you.
Yeah, Davidson.
A Davidson Creek
is a
on
lake.
Lake Norman.
To
Yeah.
me, that's a lake. Yes,
All
it's
right.
a creek, but it's a lake.
And it does kind of fish like its own little area, doesn't it?
Yeah.
On the
It
lake.
does. It does.
Or like at Hartwell. I mean, some of those creeks on the lower end of Hartwell.
Yes. That,
Just
yeah,
there-
very much so.
So if you pull up a map, you're looking for the widest body of water on that particular lake.
That's exactly right.
And the other thing we have to keep in mind too, and correct me if I'm wrong, you would prefer main lake over creek, but you do both. But excuse me, if we're looking for multiple day tournament fish, then you want to be in an area where you feel like also has a chance to replenish more.
Yeah.
Which 9 times out of 10, a main lake deal would
Right.
typically be a little bit more reliable. But shallow fish in the summertime can be really tricky.
Oh,
'cause
yeah, I mean,
you need
you-
a lot of stuff to run.
You have to have. Well, let's. So
Talk about that, yeah.
So the BFL's the 2-day tournament it used to be at Wiley every year. I mean, I lived on the lake my entire life until 11 months ago. I don't know, I feel like I'm being cocky when I say this, but I'm not. But I feel like I know every best little one caster, every best little 20, 30 yard stretch on that lake for that kind of fishing. It's really not, I mean, what is it, 12,000 acres? It's not a
Yeah,
great
12,
big lake.
13,000 acres.
It's small.
But I'll run 200 places in a day, and you're getting 6, 7, 8 bites a day. So it's definitely not like you're gonna go catch the full out of them typically, but it is a really good way to catch
Big ones.
bigger than average fish. One thing I've never really understood is why those fish are always so poor, why they're so skinny.
Well, that's
And it's like that all across the country.
That's
Yeah.
typical of a shallow water resident fish, though, from my experience.
Outside of the spawn. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
outside of the spawn. I feel like, and we'll talk about the offshore fish and the schooling fish more, which
Yeah.
I feel like the schooling fish are going to be your healthiest, best looking
Oh,
fish
yeah.
on the lake.
Yeah.
Also the most unreliable. But yeah, to your point.
But you got to think about the different forage they're feeding on. Those shallow fish in the summer are mainly targeting bluegill. Mm-hmm. And they have to work a lot harder to catch them than a fish that's sitting offshore suspended around a ball of bait that can pretty much just swim up there and open his mouth.
and working with a lot of teammates.
And working with a lot of teammates, exactly. When you've got one rogue largemouth or 2 or 3 rogue largemouth chasing one bluegill, probably not going to be as healthy as 40 of them chasing 10 million shad.
But
Right,
if you're,
yeah.
and that's another thing, that's a good tip because in y'all's experience fishing shallow in the summertime, occasionally you will catch a really pretty healthy fat fish. But what tip would you give the viewers when that happens? What would you think is going on when you catch a fish that is not living there the whole time?
I mean, you're probably close to a big body of water, a big open water, and it's a fresh fish coming up.
And a place that possibly
Yeah.
has a better potential to replenish.
And most of those big healthy fish that you catch in the summer like that shallow is going to be in the first hour of the morning.
Very true.
Because what happens then is fishing shallow, you kind of get the best of both worlds because you've got fish that are living offshore that pull up on the bank at night to feed in the hot summertime. And you'll have a few of those fish, just residual leftovers that first hour of the morning that stay up there shallow a little longer than they should, and they're susceptible to being caught before they pull back out and suspend offshore or do whatever they do. And I think those are your fatter fish that you catch shallow in the summertime. Those are those nomadic fish that are normally not on the bank, but they pull up there for a short feeding period, right at daylight or last little bit of dark, and that's when you catch those big fat ones versus the skinny ones that are like this long, and you hook them, you're like, oh my God, that's an 8-pounder, and you get him in, and he's like 3 1/4.
Yeah, we've all experienced that. So, New, I got a question for you. You mentioned a couple of your favorite baits, but a buzz bait, you like a buzz bait a lot, shallow in summertime. So, this is from Chris Anello and Tim Maynard. They're actually talking about it. Tim kind of answered the question on from his perspective, but Chris wants to know, when you're throwing a buzz bait, you throwing them without a skirt or with a toad only, and why would you pick a skirt over a soft plastic trailer, or when would you do that?
I don't own a buzzbait with a skirt on it.
Okay.
And
Let's take a vote.
This is a really smart aleck answer, but it's supposed to be, it's the truth and it's funny. That went out in like 1998. That's not cool anymore.
Nah, it was a little later than that. It was like
98, you were like
I-
7.
It was
I
like
was 8.
2007.
You
Yeah.
weren't even fishing in 98.
2008.
Oh yeah, I was born fishing.
Let's take a vote. So, New doesn't own a buzzbait with a skirt on it.
I
I do not own a buzzbait with a skirt on it. What about Matt?
I'm not gonna lie. I've got a handful, but it's because it's the old school lunker lure ones that have the
Oh yeah, the old.
yeah
Yeah, I know what you're
that
talking
have
about.
the, what's that
the
flat
plastic,
old-
yeah, the flat shad.
no,
No, it's what
the-
is that skirt material
Oh,
called?
it was
Golly.
it was old school
Oh, I know what
spinnerbait
you're talking
material.
about.
Yeah,
Like
those
you know the
chartreuse and
buzzbait I'm
blue.
talking about though?
So I got a chartreuse. I got some black.
You know the
ones.
one I'm talking about? It had a long flat head and it was plastic. It was skirted too, obviously, but it was a
I don't remember
headbanger buzzbait. Lunker Lure made it.
All right, so
I love that.
to
thing
answer your
back in the day.
question,
I
those are the
remember
only
that.
ones I own with a skirt on them.
All right, we'll allow that.
But other than that, I don't. I mean, and if I do, they're just waiting to have the skirts pulled off of them.
Well, here's like I seen what you were talking about. They were talking about the skirt as well. I mean, here's the advantages of having a horny
Well, and
toad
Tim-
or a plastic trailer.
Touch on this real quick too, because Tim said when he wants to skip docks, he's always throwing like a buzz toad or something. But if he wants to drag over cover, he throws the skirted buzz bait. Now, I'm asking Tim and y'all, why would you throw a skirted buzz bait over cover over the toad? And would you? Y'all
I'm
obviously
going to tell
wouldn't.
you why I throw a toad or a piece of plastic, a toad. 100% of the
So
time.
do you ever throw like a little swim bait or anything on the bait?
I mean, I have, but
If I
No.
go down to an 1/8 ounce buzz bait,
Yes.
I'll put a little swim
Yep.
bait or
Okay.
something on.
now if I throw an 1/8 ounce, I put a speed crawl,
okay.
a Zoom speed crawl.
All right.
I mean, it's basically a horny toad, but it's a finesse
Yeah.
horny toad.
I've seen actually Brandon Cobb likes that Z crawl because it's flat.
Yeah.
You know, and it's got the little.
See, I don't
Little-
like the Z crawl. I know a lot of people do, but it doesn't have the bulk. It doesn't cast nearly as good as a horny toad. But Cobb pretty dang good, so it works.
Yeah, he's a good shallow water
Yes,
fisherman.
he's good, period. But, all right, so a horny toad on a buzzbait, it does a bunch of things. You can cast it 300 miles. You can skip it 200 miles. And think
a
about
long
this.
way.
When that fish comes up to bite that buzzbait, like, they don't actually bite it. They come up and suck in. But if they come up and they try to suck a skirt, which is a bunch of little hairs basically, they don't have a whole lot to suction to. Does that make sense?
Okay.
They're going to suck more water in than they are bait.
All right. So if you've got a
Okay.
big piece of plastic,
Because
a
there's
horny
less
toad-
resistance on the when the skirt's just
Yeah.
flared out in the water.
This
I
is
got you.
knowledge right here. News hitting.
All
with-
right, all right, well,
he's hitting with the
so-
knowledge right here.
If they come up and they suck a big piece of plastic, which is bigger, it's bulkier, horny toad, they're going to get it a lot better. Think about how many fish you've back in the day, 20 years ago on a skirted buzzbait that you just barely hooked.
And I
think
mean,
about
and blow up on it and leave a hole in the water this big around.
Yeah.
Like, how'd he
and
miss
and you
that?
never touch him on the buzzbait. You're like, God, that was a giant. How'd I miss him?
Yeah.
Those same fish will hit that horny toad buzzbait,
It'll be in
and
their
you
goozle.
won't even see the ripple. You'll just see the bait go underwater because they hone in on that toad. Because the difference between another difference that I'll add to
This is
news
good stuff.
is with a skirted buzzbait, usually the skirt rides closer to the surface and closer to the blade. With the horny toad, the toad is actually underneath the water about 1.5 inches versus a skirt. So those fish come up behind it and just kind of eat it. Like they can hone in on it better, and just everything New said was spot
Bottom
on. That
line
was
is
pretty
your
good.
hookup ratio in y'all's experience is way better with
Way
a soft
better.
plastic
Way
trailer
And
as
here's
opposed to a skirt.
One more thing. You can fish it slower. It's got more drag.
True, too.
It slows it down.
Okay.
Um,
So
you know-
y'all like clacking buzz baits or non-clacking buzz baits for your
Non.
summertime fishing?
non.
I don't throw a clacker either.
I don't know that I own a clacker.
How about headbangers like what you was talking about earlier?
Yes, and honestly, I can't tell you why or when.
When we say
It's just-
headbangers, explain to viewers what we're talking
All
about.
right, so like Greenfish makes one. It's called the hammerhead. The blade, it's got a head that's designed. It's typically they're flat somewhat, and the
Booger Man is the one I threw for years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yep.
think that was the first one to
Yeah.
come out with the design news talking about.
but the wire from the head to the line tie is shorter, so it brings that blade closer to the head, and the blade will actually hit every rotation that hits the head.
So it kind of acts like a clacker.
Somewhat.
Yeah, definitely a different sound though.
For
definitely
sure.
a different sound. All right, one more question, then we got to dive into Thrift's wheelhouse on offshore fishing, summertime bass. Do you guys slide the head into the toad, or do you leave the head outside of the toad? And I think for me it depends on the buzzbait you're using. But go ahead, New.
Definitely head inside the toad. Todd Alton is the godfather of the buzz toad.
Him or Bumgardner? Is it Alton?
Is Alton.
Is Alton.
Definitely
All right,
Alton.
interesting.
If it's not broke, don't fix it, and it's not broke. That's how he done it. That's how I learned how to do it. I mean, really, that's why I do it. But if you think about the science to it, if you slide it over the head, the hook's farther back. So why would you not slide
And
it
you
over
got,
the head?
and
and
it
you got
stays-
less drag if you're skipping it.
And it stays
Yeah.
up there better too. It acts as a keeper,
Yep.
more or less.
Yep.
All right, so I hope that answered y'all's questions. No, as far as the spinnerbait, Trace Bigelow said, do you take the skirts off of a spinnerbait? I haven't taken, actually, I'm the opposite. I probably don't own a spinnerbait without a skirt. Y'all
See, I got on that deal a couple years ago at Lake Cumberland.
throwing like a grub or swim bait on it? or
I was
something?
putting a
Swim bait.
4-inch Demiki swim bait on it.
No skirt.
No skirt.
Okay.
And
All right.
catch them really good.
Well, if you think about beetle spans and stuff like that, I mean, that
Well,
always
what
caught
got me
fire,
doing
though.
that was I ended up winning the event on a single swim bait. But I
I'm about to
was
say you didn't catch them on no spinner bait.
I did the third day or the fourth day. But I caught
I'm
them
gonna
all
go
on
back
the
and
swim
watch
bait.
this video.
Go back and watch it.
Oh, it's gonna show all the
Go
ones
back
on
and watch
swim
it.
bait because it's
So
the ones you weighed in.
The fourth day, the wind was blowing in the morning, and I couldn't feel my swim bait. Like I was throwing it on a light head, and I couldn't get the depth right. I couldn't tell when I was on the bottom, when I was close to the bottom where I needed to be. So I went in one pocket and caught 15 pounds on the spinner bait right quick, and then the wind laid down. And I caught them all.
Okay.
So I didn't weigh any in on the spinner bait, but I went in one pocket and caught, I don't know, 7 or 8
Caught
on
some
the.
confidence builders.
Yeah, I caught 15 pounds. I mean,
Those confidence builders
Yeah,
do
that-
a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, they make sure you're going to feed your family for the week or
Yeah.
the month. And
and
it just gets you comfortable. It just
it
gets you
gives
comfortable
the-
where you can
it
play.
gives you
and-
wiggle room to try some things that maybe you
Correct.
wouldn't want to try.
It opens it up. A
Yeah,
little bit
opens
Yeah.
opens some doors. You're like, hey, I can chase a rabbit for 30 minutes and see what happens. You know.
more. Very much.
All right, speaking, let me throw this out there real quick since he's talking about chasing a rabbit. So at Pickwick the other week, I was the last man in.
Does this have anything to do with shallow water bass fishing in the summer?
No, but it's chasing a rabbit.
Okay.
So I was the last man in. Gas is $3 or $32 a gallon, I think. It was like whatever, $4.60.
Little
But
less
anyway,
than
so I couldn't lose any points. So I said, am I going to?
Oh, you were the last man in the day 3 cut?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
so I couldn't fall. All I could do was gain points. I knew I probably wasn't going to make any money in that event, but I could potentially make enough points to gain money at the end of the year, or make sure I
Yeah,
qualify. for
points
class.
are valuable at the end of the year.
Yeah. So I was like on the fence. Do I just pull out here and not run any gas so I don't burn $200 worth of gas, or do I run around and really try to do everything I can to make up some points? And wound up running around a lot. I gained 6 points though.
6 points can be pretty critical in this
exactly.
sport. All right, so
Chase your rabbit.
I ain't chasing. I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Thrift. So New gave up some really good information on shallow water fishing in the summertime, where to look for him, what he likes to throw. And y'all talking diving into the buzzbait trailers and why and things like that. That's pretty good stuff. So Thrift is now going to talk about summertime fishing, offshore more or less, right?
Yeah, just
So-
offshore summertime fishing. And I'm not talking ledge fishing because
Yeah, don't confuse this with ledge fishing.
this is not ledge fishing. Ledge fishing is early summer. Once you get into the dog days of summer, those ledge fish have seen every bait on demand
6 times.
6 times
600 times.
by every bass fisherman on the lake and a couple of thousand bass fishermen from out of town. So they are educated. They're smart. They're lethargic. They don't want to feed but like the last hour of the day. So we're not talking about those big schools on a ledge. When I'm talking about dog days of summer, deep water fishing, I'm not gonna. I hesitate to call it deep water fishing because it
Fishing
may
off
not
the
be
bank.
deep, but it's target fishing, fishing for 1 or 2 bass that are on one piece of structure, or one something that's offshore, off the bank that most people are overlooking. I'm talking about your smaller, isolated targets, things like that that a lot of people will overlook, and it's kind of a play off a new shallow water pattern. Like he talked about having 200 places on Lake Wiley and running them all in a day. When I'm talking about dog days of summer offshore fishing, I'm talking about having 40, 50, 60 places offshore. You're making 5 or 6 casts. You're running to the next one and making 5 or 6 casts. To me, that is dog day of summer offshore fishing. And as far as bait goes, you really have a 3-prong approach that I start with, depending on depth of the structure. If it's a brush pile that's close to the surface, my first cast is always going to be with a topwater because I want to catch the biggest, most active fish that is setting up high in that piece of structure. And if you'll notice too, the 3 baits I'm going to talk about covers 3 different water columns. So first bait, top water is going to cover that surface. So if your piece of structure, whether it's a old piling, a rock pile, a point, a brush pile, whatever it may be, if it's within 6 or 8 feet of the surface in fairly clear water, you're going to have some fish sitting on top of that structure that'll be willing to chase a topwater bait. Your herring fish, you know, cane pile fish, things like that. That's going to be my first cast. My second cast is going to be something that covers that mid-depth range, and even something like a light-weighted Nico worm that I can let fall slowly, get it down there to that mid-water column, something like that. A small swim bait like that 4-inch Demiki Armor Shad swim bait that I can fish that mid-water column. And then my last cast or two is going to be with a bottom bait. I mean, a jig, your Texas rigs, your shaky heads, drop shot, something like that that's going to, you know, get those fish that maybe don't want to come out of that brush pile and chase that topwater, chase that swim bait, that are sitting there, and if you get a bait right in their face, you can get them to bite. So that is my 3-pronged approach to fishing, you know, an isolated target offshore, covering every water column. And the cool thing about this deal is you're not fishing a large group of fish. So there's no need to sit there for 30, 45 minutes because you're wasting time. The beauty of this pattern is the element of surprise. When you pull up there first, you make those first 5 or 6 casts. If he's hungry, you're going to catch him because odds are you're the only one that's thrown there all day. So those fish aren't pressured. If they're there and they're hungry, they're going to bite. And once they know you're there, you can forget it. You're not going to get a bite. Once you lose that element of surprise, especially with spotted bass in clear water, when you make your first cast and you hook one of those spots, it pulls all the rest of them to the boat. So you can sit there and fish for 30 or 40 minutes, you're wasting time. But you can leave, come back an hour or two later, and that whatever 4 or 5 bass that are hanging around that piece of structure will actually pull back to it, and you're going to catch another one in the first 4 or 5 casts again. So it's the same as new shallow water, you know, dog day of summer pattern, but you can apply it offshore as well, just running as many specific targets as you can. And I know I talked about the 3 different, you know, water columns, like 3 different baits covering all different water columns, but it doesn't have to be a deep piece of structure. You know, it could be maybe a rock pile in 8 feet of water, or a brush pile in 12 feet of water, something like that. It doesn't have to be out in 15, 20, 30 feet deep. It depends on the lake. You know, if you're on a dirty water lake, obviously the fish are going to be shallow. I'll use a High Rock, for example. It's a great offshore lake, but being the first lake on that Yadkin River system, it tends to have a little more color than most other lakes in the area. So those fish are normally a little bit shallower. You know, there are a lot of fish caught in that 6 to 12 foot range. And versus you go somewhere like Lake Norman where you've got a deep, clear body of water, that, you know, 12 to 20 foot range plays more because the fish just feel a little safer. But to me,
And you've got
all in
spotted
all-
bass.
Do what?
Spotted bass.
Yeah, spotted bass tend to do a little
That
more.
changes
That
things, too.
changes a little bit, but all in all, the pattern runs true all over the country. You can go back to, I mean, pretty much every tournament I've ever fished in the summertime, this is what I try to do. I mean, even our last BPT event at Watts Bar, I was doing exactly this. I ended up finishing 15th. And I was running 40 or 50 brush piles, little rock piles, things like that, and just trying to fish as many as I could. And the cool thing about it, too, is, like I said earlier, coming back and getting multiple bites off the same piece of structure, is if you fish a lake a couple of days in succession, you'll start narrowing down an area they're biting better in, and then you can even further narrow down 3 or 4 key pieces of structure that the fish are using more than others. And you can kind of fine tune this approach. And as far as graphing goes, this is one thing I really love about it is you can't see the fish in the stuff because there's not a huge group of fish there. I mean, there's nothing makes me happier when I hear guys say, "Oh, I found a brush pile, but I didn't see any fish on it." Like, that makes my day. I'm like, perfect, because I'm going to go throw in that brush pile and catch the one that's hiding down in it that you can't see because he's not out there where you can see him. So just because you don't think one's there probably is.
Yeah, no doubt.
So a couple questions came in, Ryan. And by the way, when I'm talking about school and fish, y'all got to watch for questions, okay?
Huh? Yeah. Okay.
I didn't even look at my screen. I was rambling. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah. Binkwood said maybe he said y'all giving the juice up tonight and y'all been drinking.
I have not.
Negative.
gotta
Well, I
drive 2
can't.
hours
I
home.
can't speak for the rest of them, but I might have had a beer or two. All right, let me go back. This is off topic a little bit. I'll jump right back in the topic, I promise. But one question was Binkwood asked back on the gas price stuff. Does the price of gas change your fishing much? And I'm gonna just be straight up at this level. You cannot allow that to be a factor. So in my eyes, like I don't let that factor into
No,
my
it
decision
doesn't.
making on the water, because when you do, you just get your teeth kicked in.
Yeah.
Because nobody else is concerned about it. And everybody's concerned about it.
Right.
But you can't take that.
You can't let extra $100 today give you a chance of not making 10,000.
Or the classic. Or
Right.
the Red Crest. Or
Right.
Yeah. So
Yep.
that's. I mean. That's,
Yeah, $100 is a lot of money. I don't care how much money you have. Definitely consider it. That's why I don't go fun fishing when I'm at home.
I still go
very
fun
rare.
fishing. Like I used to go fun fishing at Norman, but it's like an hour and 10 minutes now, so I just go to Moss.
Well, yeah, and that's a little different when you're out there fishing for fun, but when you're doing it for a living, we're,
But like, if I was fishing a BFL that's cost you like $340 to fish now, I think that's what it cost me to fish one.
I hadn't
At
fished
Murray?
one in a while. I don't know.
Oh,
Tyler
that's
knows.
crazy.
How much,
Don't know.
Tyler? 200.
But it's
200
like
is
an
about.
$80 membership fee. But anyways, when you're there and if you win, you're going to make $3,000 to $5,000, maybe if you're lucky. You got to really consider it because you got to look at your return on investment.
well, if the bottom line
Not
is
really. Not really. If you think about the long run, it's just like us.
Well, if you're just cherry picking that one tournament, you got to consider
Yeah,
it.
but if you're in it for points, I mean, you got a chance at the All American,
Yep.
which is a free tournament. You got a chance of making
Depends
a
on what your
regional.
goals are.
Yeah.
You got a chance of making a regional, which is also a free tournament.
nuh-uh,
It's not
anymore.
free. They added it.
Not anymore. It's
Okay,
$300
I didn't
on
know
it.
that. I hadn't fished it. Okay, X that. The regional is no longer free. Last time I fished it,
It was when
free.
I won it.
Yeah,
It was when I went. Yeah,
Until this year.
Okay,
Yeah.
until this year.
it's,
But
it's like
anyway,
$300 or something.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
so that's. I mean, I still don't let it bother me because I want to go catch bass, and especially if I'm in competition. I think that's what makes bass fishermen awesome. Is we all want to win.
We're
and
awesome.
We are awesome. We're awesome.
I
For the
just
most
go in
part.
Thrift's boat, then I don't have to worry about it.
That
We
is
went
true.
today and burnt like
We
points.
burnt almost a half a gallon today.
Almost,
half
yeah.
a gallon.
I don't know, we did get on the plane twice.
for about
When you left the
22
boat landing.
seconds.
The
22
first spot.
seconds.
Yeah, we left and then we ran back.
All right, well, we got to hit a couple more questions on your topic because Jimmy wants to know. He's curious on the weight on that mid
Oh,
water
yeah.
column, a 10th, an 8th, or are you going bigger?
A lot of that depends on how deep you're wanting to fish and also the type of bait you're throwing. So you got to think there's a lot of baits that'll hit that mid depth range. I know I mentioned a Nico rig. I mentioned the swim bait, the 4-inch Armor Shad swim bait. On the Nico rig, I'm usually going with, actually it's a 16th ounce Demiki nail weight. They make a Nico sinker, but I like that little 16th ounce nail weight from Demiki.
The little round ball one?
Yeah, it's got the little round ball on the end of it. It's a 1/16th ounce. And, when you're throwing that on a spinning rod with like a 4-inch stinger, it falls fairly quickly and you can cast it really well still. And when you're talking about a swim bait, the weight of the jig head determines, like, a lot of that ties in with your line diameter too. The bigger line you're throwing, the heavier the jig head's got to be. As you drop down in line size, you can drop down in the weight of your jig head and still get that nice swim at whatever depth you're trying to achieve. So I would say for that, 10 to 12 foot depth range, kind of that mid water column of the brush pile or rock pile or whatever it may be. I mean, you go with a 4 or 5 inch swim bait on 12-pound line. You can get by with a 1/4 ounce to a 3/8 ounce head. And, as you step up, like if you're on a lake with historically bigger than average fish, you step up to 15-pound line and a little bigger swim bait, you bump it up to a 1/2 ounce or a 3/4 ounce head. So a lot of that's determined. There's a lot of factors there. And I know I've talked about a lot, but we could talk for 3 hours on that subject. But
All right, one more question. I got one more question about your topic because Chris Anello is a good question. He said and a lot of people are like this, very confident in that 1 to 25 foot
Yeah.
range. Once it's deeper, then when he starts questioning what he's doing. Brush piling 30 to 35 foot. What's the move there?
Ooh, brush piling 30 to 35.
And again, remind them that this is relative to the lake they're fishing, because
Right.
fish may not get that deep in the lake.
Yeah,
he's
some
fishing.
lakes they don't get that that deep, and a lot of the lakes, especially down south, when you get in those dog days of summer, the thermocline sets up and
Stratification
fish will,
of the water.
Stratification of the water, and fish will
Sorry.
actually not be that deep anyway. A lot of times, when you get in that dog days of summer, unless you're on a lake with a lot of current, and that you're not going to have that stratification, and you're not going to have the thermocline set up. But on a lake that's, kind of stagnant, doesn't have a lot of inflow, a lot of outflow, you'll get that thermocline set up, and those fish will normally stay right above that thermocline, and usually it's around 20 to 25. So once I get into the, the dog days of summer, I rarely fish anything deeper than 25. But
Even them
if I
fancy
had to, I would be throwing most likely a Texas rig of some sort, or even a shaky head. I've
You'd be
caught some.
throwing a shaky head.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
Green,
I-
green.
if you go back and watch the last cup we had at Lake Murray, Justin Atkins won it. On the fourth day, I caught one. I know this goes against everything I
You
just
told
said.
me about this
I
fish.
caught one in 36 foot of water on a shaky head, and I've never seen a bass do this before. I was throwing an 1/8 ounce shaky head. And yes, it takes a long time to get to the bottom of 36 feet of water.
35 foot of water.
But I was trying to get a bite, and I did. I caught like a 3.5 pounder, and when he came up, I guess it was so deep or whatever, like his stomach was actually sticking out of his mouth like a saltwater fish.
Oh my Lord.
I've never seen that before in my life.
I
Only
seen
Did he
time-
die?
No, he didn't die. I weighed him in.
Wow.
I poked it back in there.
Wow.
Poked
That
it,
is-
he
I mean-
pushed his stomach back.
I caught a Goliath grouper one time that did that, but
Did you get in and swim with him like they do?
I did.
Did
and
you?
45 minutes later, dude caught a shark right there, and I did cuss them all.
All right. Well, y'all left me a whopping about 7 minutes to talk about my topic. So, all right. Now, y'all are in charge of the questions here. We're going to talk about
We got it.
fish. Y'all
Go.
got them?
Let me add one thing to the school. I may have already said this, but the reason we got mad on the schooling fish, not to swell his head up, but he is a very good summertime schooling fish
Swell his
bass
head up.
fisherman. Like I'll never forget
Thanks, Thrift.
every championship, especially at Ouachita and Murray, everywhere we used to fish together in the summer, Matt's sitting on schooling fish catching them.
You know what's crazy is we've got better baits than he does for that. I know we do, but he's better
You're
at it than
probably
we.
right.
But he's
I'm
better
not
at
going to
it than we
disagree
are.
with that.
Y'all
dude.
got better baits than I do for everything. I just
he's
make
still
do.
better.
I'm kind of like Dudley. No, Dudley's probably way worse than me as far as what he actually throws during the tournament. If you put it all together,
He throws a wacky worm.
Yeah.
A Nico wacky worm.
And a Ned.
and a nail weighted wacky worm.
And a nail wacky
And maybe a drop shot wacky worm. All right, so let's talk about schooling fish. I'm a little bit more diverse than that, but he has made a lot of money on a wacky
He
worm.
has made a living on a wacky
Yeah,
worm.
100%. So let's talk about schooling bass. And, one reason to look for them in the dog days of summer, especially in tournament situations, we talked about it earlier, we touched on it a little bit, was that it is some of the most healthiest, heaviest, prettiest, most plentiful fish in the lake. The problem with that is typically they do get less pressure. That, to me, that comes down to where you find them. I mean, if you find them like on a bridge, like let's just take a bridge at Lake Wiley, for instance, like everybody in the country knows about them fish.
They are not less
But,
pressure.
correct. But if you find them out there off of a point in 30, 40, 50 foot of water, things like that, sometimes those, and Ouachita has a lot of places. You talked about Ouachita,
Yes.
but Ouachita has a lot of places like that. It has really deep timber pockets and things like that have a lot of bass that live in them, and they will show themselves. And one thing to keep in mind, I think we've all experienced this, even on a grass lake, whatever it is. When you see a fish come up schooling, usually he's there for a reason, and it's not just bait. Usually there's something holding a school of bass relatively close. It might not be directly under where they're at, But more often than not, if you see a school of bass, y'all have probably seen them in grass lakes like this, and you find a wad of them by accident, right? You find a wad of them, and you can't necessarily, there might be a hole in the grass, there might be, you know, a rock there, it might be something different. But same applies to me for big points, places where there's marinas, which obviously offer bass havens in the summertime. There's giant schools of bass that live in marinas. Our forward-facing sonars kind of changed the game a little bit on this whole school and fish deal. So when you find them now, they might not be as unpressured as they were several years ago before forward-facing sonar. But there's a lot of places. When you find these fish, you need to really dissect the area and start to understand it. Like, for instance, if you pull into a point and you're sitting your boat in 40 foot of water throwing up in the 10, and then a fish blows up behind you in 50, the next time you pull up to that point, start outside of 50 and work your way in, and be really, really, really aware of what's going on. Because one thing I do, and I don't know if y'all do this, but in practice, and I cruise the lake in the summertime, especially dog days in the summer, get out there really early and cruise about 30, 35 mile an hour and just run around real slow everywhere, looking at main lake stuff, points, marinas, whatever you can get your boat by at a reasonable speed where you can still keep your head on a swivel and pay attention to what's going on. There's a lot of little clues and things to tip you off to finding schooling fish, and when you do, you really need to understand the area and understand why they're there. Now, I take this with a grain of salt for herring lakes, because those can be some of the most frustrating schooling fish I've ever fished for. And that is more because of those fish seem to move. Now, it was a spot, let me take back to Thrift's point, like the cane piles, the brush piles, the points, things like that on herring lakes. You will find giant schools of bass, but they'll still roam on you, but a lot of times they'll still be relatively close to the area. One thing you need to take into consideration, too, is when you pull up on a place and you're on schooling bass, is just because you don't see them breaking the surface doesn't mean you can't throw out there and catch them, because a lot of these fish are relatively close to the surface most of the time. They don't shoot down at the bottom in 50 foot and come back up and blow the top out of the water. But a lot of times these fish will be cruising around, and this is where forward-facing sonar comes in now. I experienced this on the Cup at Murray when forward-facing sonar first came out. I didn't have it, but Scott Martin did, and he's out there actually in open water. Fish aren't even busted, and he's scanning around looking for wolf packs of them. And that's another thing too. It's not like usually when these fish blow up, there's not 100 of them there, but there'll be a pack of them there. But it's not
5 or 6, 4 or 5.
5, 6, 7, something like that. More often than not, it's a small group of fish. And one thing you've got to be aware of is which direction are they going. When they start blowing up, it's a little easier to kind of gauge that direction. But the biggest thing, the biggest mistake you can make is being impatient, to me. And that's, Anthony Gagliardi taught me this.
Yeah, Anthony is
Sit there and
expert
just watch
schooling
for
fish.
30 minutes. Not
Watch,
even make a cast.
watch, and observe. And if they come up within a cast length, then throw. But if not, be patient, because the worst thing you can do is get in an area and say it's 100 yards long and 75 yards wide, and you start chasing them around in a big circle. That's the worst thing that can happen, because then you're not going to ever make an efficient cast. If you just start randomly casting out there, you're wasting time, because the second you do that and they come up and they blow up 50 feet from you or 20 feet
That's
from
what
you.
always happens to me.
Well, you shouldn't cast then.
I know.
Well, patience at schooling fish is a virtue, and it's so hard to do. It's so hard to do. But the other thing that you need to work on, as far as schooling fish go, the one thing that I've had to work on over the years is making super precise casts. Long, super precise casts. Now, yes, sometimes they'll come up and blow a bait out of the water 2 feet from the boat, and you can't do anything wrong. But when they're right at the end of a long cast, you need to concentrate on what Scott Martin calls trading the bait, meaning the direction those herring or shad or whatever the forage is are headed. You need to put your bait right in front of their nose, right in front of their nose. You don't need to put it a foot behind them, 2 foot beside them, or whatever. You need to lead them just like you would a dove or something like that, and trade the bait. Put that bait exactly where that forage is or where that forage is headed, and that'll increase just your bite ratio in general. We could talk about 65 different schooling fish baits. A couple that I always have hanging off the deck, obviously, is a walking topwater bait of some sort. Sizes based on the size of the forage, typically. We've talked a little bit, I think, on here Trip, about crappie jigs and all kinds of stuff like that for schooling bass. I like the old school. I've only got a handful of them, but the old, I think it was Strike King, made a wingding The old wing ding, that was a good one. There's the little, it's similar to the little George, but I like the wing ding because it's actually, the line actually goes through the bait itself, the body itself, and you can tie off whatever size treble hook you're comfortable with on the bottom. And that thing allows to swing freely up and down the line, which to me, it allows you to land more fish that way, as opposed to a little George or something.
I was going to ask you, I know you mentioned topwater. Like, what is your go-to subsurface schooling fish bait?
Probably a very small swim bait of some sort. Lunker Hunt makes a finesse swim bait, which is very similar to a 2.8 Kitech. So relative to, to give you a good understanding of the size of the bait. And then jig head depends on how fast I'm fishing it. And a lot of times subsurface, when you say subsurface, I'm thinking like within 2 foot of the surface, because more often than not, those fish, that's another thing. You always want to stay above the fish. Like if they're 10 foot deep, and there again, forward facing sonar will tell you how deep they are. Keep that bait above them. They're always feeding up when they're out there suspended and they're out there schooling. So I'd say a small swim bait of some sort
I got
for
one
sure.
for you. 1/8 ounce pulse jig with a tiny zoom fluke.
The tiny fluke on the 1/8 ounce pulse jig is a schooling fish catcher.
sir.
That is a good
That would be one of the deals, and thank you for reminding me of that. But that would be one of the deals that, and I throw it on spinning rod. I'm sure you probably throw it on spinning rod, the 1/8 ounce.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't throw it on a bait caster. You hesitated like you throw it on a
I
bait caster.
can't. I do, but typically schooling fish, no.
What pound line if you throw it on a bait caster?
8.
Okay. So, and that's another thing with the 1/8 ounce pulse jig. You don't want to go much bigger than 8, in my opinion, because you start to mess with the action a little bit.
I mean, you could go 10, maybe 12, but you don't need to.
Right.
There's no reason to.
Yeah. So,
I got one. I know this is your thing, but the faster gear ratio reel possible,
yes.
Ooh,
because
that's true.
kind of like, see, you're talking about sitting there watching like Anthony does.
Yep.
I'm very impatient. I do it for about 30 to 42 seconds, and I got to cast.
Yep.
Well, as soon as I do, one comes up bowling. Well, I use a Revo Rocket, which is a 10-to-1 gear ratio, 43 inches per turn, versus a 7-to-1 where you're about 32, according to what brand it is. But every turn of the handle, you're
a
nine-
foot more.
or almost a foot difference for every turn of the handle, so I can get it in a lot quicker.
Well, and yeah. So if you're in between casts, or if you're the guy or gal that sits there and just
Or
doesn't
if
have
you-
any patience, that does pay a big.
If you did wait, even if you were waiting and you threw and you missed them by a foot,
Yeah,
and
you
they were
could-
going to
you
the
need to
left,
might have a
you
second
could
shot.
right.
Yeah.
Mike can have a second shot. So, talk about lakes. I don't want everybody to get the wrong impression of wherever you go all the time, you're looking for schooling fish in the dog days of summer, because places like High Rock and places, to me, ideal lakes to look for schooling fish, places like Lake Lanier, places like Ouachita, Lake Hamilton. The clearer the better, because schooling fish is obviously a visual
Clearer,
deal.
deeper, with
Less
some
current.
kind of the one thing that rings true too with everything, all the lakes you just mentioned, standing timber.
Yeah.
So deep, clear, highland, standing timber reservoirs, that's your money for schooling fish.
Yep. And again, remember, it's not always a definite. You don't always have to see the fish blowing up necessarily. Once you locate them in a certain area, if they're blowing up, like I said, be patient. But if not, there's ways. You can use big knocking baits. There's ways to call those fish up too, especially if they're super close to the top of the water column, close to the surface.
Forage.
I've caught them. What's that?
What forage is in the lake, too?
That's true
is a
too.
big, big,
Herring
big deal.
fish seem to come up a lot quicker and a lot faster than your shad fish.
Yeah, you're talking about they're schooling on 4 to 7 inch herring.
Yeah.
That's a big difference when they're schooling on 1 to 2.5 inch shad.
Yep. And you hear guys all the time, and people get the misconception of saying, I threw my topwater out there, and it's 30, and I caught one out of 30 foot of water on topwater. Well, I didn't catch it out of 30 foot of water.
No,
His
they were
boat
over
was sitting in
30 foot
30.
water.
He was
Yeah.
over 30 foot of water. So that's a little misconception. Another
you can
thing.
call them up a long way, like
Oh, yeah.
you can at least call them 20 foot.
Oh, I think in super clear water
Minimum.
lakes, 100%. Yeah,
every
yeah,
bit of it.
definitely. And I've seen smallmouth do the same thing sometimes. Come long distances to hit a topwater bait, and that's not even talking about whether the depth of the water is 30 foot, but come like 30 feet.
Oh yeah,
In 5 foot of water.
I saw
You know what I'm saying?
one.
Like,
Yeah.
We were at Smith
this
Lake
is not
this
schooling
year.
fish, but
This was actually schooling fish at Smith Lake this year for the Bass Pro Tour. I was fishing this little drain pocket, and my boat was actually sitting in 28 to 30 foot, and there were fish schooling in this little drain, and I was throwing a long A, and it was cool because it's the first time I'd ever seen it. I'd heard of guys doing that before, but I could actually see my long A on the Humminbird Mega Live, and I seen a fish come out of about 15 to 20 feet of water and come up there and bite it. And it was bad because I wasn't watching my bait. I was watching the fish on my graph, and I missed him.
Where this new sonar gets you in
I'm
trouble.
sitting there, I'm like winding my long A, staring down at my Mega Live, and I'm like, oh, he's coming. Then I felt him bite it. I was like, oh, I bit it. And I fished him.
He's only had Mega Live less than a year. So. All
All
right, hey,
I'm
I seen a
still
question real quick. You told me to look for questions.
Yep,
and
good
I
job.
lost it. Where'd it go? Do you guys think the deeper a fish will come up for a bait, the more likely he will bite?
You mean once they make a commitment to come up?
The way I'm reading the question. All right, the fish is in.
The deeper
20
the fish is
Yeah.
he more likely to bite.
Well, no. I mean, the deeper the fish is, if I can see him on my forward facing stuff, that's another thing. Not everybody watching this show or listening to us doesn't have forward facing sonar. So keep in mind.
Hold on. It says the deeper a fish will come up for a bait, the more likely will he bite. So he's in 27 foot of water. If he's coming up slow, he's probably not going to bite. If he's coming up fast,
If I see him streaking, then I think he's going
yes,
to eat.
he's going to bite.
Correct. Streaking meaning like
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
If I see him coming up like this, not
Probably not gonna
necessarily.
happen.
Right. Another thing that I think is a misconception about schooling fish, and y'all can give me your feedback and your experience. A lot of people get on a deep bite or a deep school or a deep water fish or ledge fish. Let's just take ledge fish for something that's target related, like there's a brush pile or something there and you catch one and you lose it and there's a group of fish there. Sometimes they say it impacts the rest of the school from firing. Schooling fish, I've never really had that issue. Like if I catch a schooling fish and I lose him halfway the boat or right at the boat, as far as open water schooling fish are concerned, I've never had that really negatively affect the schooling itself, the schooling activity itself. But now if you pull 4 or 5 fish off of a target like a brush
Right.
pile,
Yeah,
it seems to
that'll-
change everything.
And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that most of the time, schooling fish aren't necessarily sitting on one piece of structure. They're kind of using an area as structure.
Yeah.
Like, it may be, where 3 points run out and they kind of meet close together, but the area might be 200 or 300 yard circle, but where all those points come together is the structure they're using, but it's a bigger area. So they're not really calling one place home versus a group of fish on a brush pile or cane pile that are actually calling that piece of structure home. And once you pull them off of it, they don't really want to bite. These fish, the kind of open water schooling fish, are more using that area as a home, so it doesn't affect them. I agree with you 100%, Matt.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I don't want people to also get the misconception that dirty water doesn't have schooling fish. It's just more,
They're going to be shallower.
correct. So that's what I was getting ready to say. They're going to be a little bit shallower. They're going to be in a little bit, they might be in a few different places, but, the backs of some major creeks in the summertime. I've
Flatter
seen.
stuff.
What's that?
Typically, it's going to be flatter stuff.
Flatter stuff. That's
Not
right.
the flat stuff we were talking about bank burning, but like the flat back ends of a creek.
And lure selection does change a little bit. I've caught them really good in situations like that on a really small square bill. I've caught them good on a little small, lipless crankbait.
Chatterbait.
A little
Chatterbait.
small chat. Somebody asked
Mini-max.
earlier about when we were talking about putting the skirts,
tube?
putting a
I
tube
haven't.
or a soft plastic on a. Now I haven't put a tube on a chatterbait, but I've put small soft plastic trailers like a fluke or things like
For
that.
sure, yeah.
Different things.
Schooling Fish Killer, top secret right here. 1/8 ounce. Is it the 1/8 ounce? What do they call the teeny tiny
The
chatterbait?
mini max,
No, the teeny tiny, not the little tiny.
the
teeny
panfish.
Mini Max.
It's teeny
I still
tiny.
say, does it get smaller than the Mini Max?
tiny. Oh yeah,
Yeah, they got like a
Teeny
little
tiny.
panfish series.
yeah, with the tiny fluke again.
Okay. All right.
Schooling Fish Killer, especially in those backs. of
And in
creeks on
dirty
the
and dirty
flats.
water too.
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
Got enough vibration there to. All right. So we have. Oh Lord, I forgot the trivia. No, I remember the trivia question, but I forgot the
I
answer.
remember the answer. I got it wrote down. I got it wrote down.
Oh, by the way, our boss man from Pulse Fish Lures, Mr. Todd Goat, is watching. News in the studio tonight, and he signed the Pulse Fish Lures Bassmaster Classic sign there that was on the
Did you
booth.
see the answer?
Don't give it
I do
away.
now.
Okay.
Don't read it. You've been known to do that.
Got
you know.
this. Again, y'all.
We're
this
going to
is-
let that go after this show. This is the last show we hound Matt about telling that.
Yeah, but
Hey,
the viewers
it's
are still
been
making
5 or
comments.
6 years.
I'm only here a time or two a year, so
Okay,
I'm
we'll
gonna do
allow it when news
when
here.
I'm
We'll
here.
allow
we're
it
doing
when
it.
news here.
Real quick, do you guide on Lake Norman still, any?
No.
Okay, does
He lives
LaHue?
like 3 hours from Norman.
That's
I mean,
right.
I will, but it's going to cost you a whole lot of money.
Rusty wanted a guide on Lake Norman that we would recommend. I'm thinking, who still guides there? Does LaHue still do trips?
I don't know.
Shoot.
Does Drew?
Drew Montgomery.
Drew Montgomery
Montgomery.
still does. Okay, so
Yeah.
reach out to Drew Montgomery on social media. I don't know if he has a guide service name, but also Rusty,
I'm sure he
shoot
does.
Shane LaHue a message too.
Yeah, Shane might do it. I don't know.
Shane was doing some. I don't know
Okay,
if he
I
still
didn't
is.
know he
but
was actually doing the
shoot
guide.
Shane LaHue a message on his social media and see if he can get you hooked up. But Shane would be he'd be my number one choice if he'd take you
Yeah.
if he'd do it. But I know he was doing a few. All right, time to wrap it up, guys, gals. Thanks everybody for tuning in to another episode. We've been on a roll. We've done like 3 and 5 weeks, so we've been doing really good lately.
And
You're
I'm
leaving
actually
tomorrow.
here. I'm here.
You're leaving tomorrow,
Yes, I'm leaving tomorrow.
and where are you headed?
I'm headed to the Outer Banks.
Oh, you're going tuna fishing.
I'm going offshore fishing. That's
You gonna
right.
bring me some tuna again?
I might.
He might. Fresh, never frozen.
Fresh, never frozen.
That's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
only way.
I'm telling you, dude. Last time he brought me a little bit, we made it that night. I don't even remember. You gave me the recipe of that salad
Oh,
deal.
that sounds
Oh God,
good.
it was
God,
amazing.
it's good.
It was amazing. I was pulling up at my. I know you want me. I know I'm getting ready to wrap it up, but I was pulling up I was looking for an old photo, and I had a picture of that dish that night, and I saw it. And I was
It
like,
was
oh.
about this time of year, maybe a little earlier in June.
Yeah, it might have been a touch earlier. But all right, so time to wrap it up. Time for trivia questions. Giveaway sponsored by Lunkertex tonight. Over $150 in Lunkertex goodies, all kinds of different stuff: rod, gloves, lunker hunt baits, missile baits, big bite baits, booyah, bass casters, all kinds of goodies. So, since I forgot the trivia question, Thrift, you want to ask it? I know the answer now,
You
but
totally
I forgot.
forgot it.
I mean, I kind of know
I think
it, but I
I
don't want to screw
vaguely,
it up.
I vaguely
I
remember.
know it.
I got it.
No, let's let Thrift. Let's let Thrift. ask
Okay.
it.
So,
Okay.
the trivia question for tonight is per all three of us last event. So, Matt and News last event at Pickwick, the last day they fished, and the last day I fished at Watts Bar. So, each of us last day on the
competition.
water.
3 days total.
Oh, goodness. Excuse me. 3 days total. How many gallons collectively did all three of us burn on our last day fishing in an event? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you got that. Yeah, okay. That wasn't too confusing.
I think
that's
I
right.
explained it fairly
Yeah.
decent. Maybe not.
So it's one
Just
day
throw
for
some
each
guesses
of us.
out
If
there.
y'all only knew the thought that
tricky.
goes into these questions,
It
because
is.
it is not as easy as you think. We come up with some stuff, and
This
mine
is-
always get booted.
And you think you can come up with the right answer because
N-
most of the viewers probably know our
Hey, y'all better get to
specific
looking.
ways we like
I'm
to
not-
fish.
280. Lord,
Whoa,
that
that's
means
a
we all
lot.
got gas. Twice.
Yeah, bear in mind, I know Matt in my boat only holds, 54 gallons?
52, I thought.
Which I guess we could get gas, stop and get gas if we needed
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, y'all help me out.
Oh,
here.
this is a good one. Uh-oh, I see the answer.
I see one too.
I see the answer.
Is it Jason?
Jason Gibson.
Jason
All out.
Gibson is the official winner at 46. So you want to give them the totals? You know,
I don't remember, honestly.
I
had to look
remember
back at
my
my
total and Matt's total.
okay, so I burned 5 gallons the last day. I hope this adds up to 46.
5.
I know me
New burned
and Matt
4.
together on our last day burnt 9 gallons because I burnt 4 gallons my last day.
Oh,
was
sorry,
like-
I'm backwards. Yeah, Thrift burnt 4. I burnt 5, so that's 9, and then New burnt,
I was
37. That's right.
which is
40.
Oh, no, don't add it up.
Yeah.
Wait,
don't
yeah.
add it up.
That's right. That's right.
46 is the answer. Doesn't matter what y'all add.
No, I was
What y'all
saying
come
don't
up
add
with?
up the dollars.
Oh, yeah, we're not adding the dollars. Well, I know Thrift and I was
37
probably
gallons is
20, 25
sounds a
bucks.
lot
We were
better
good.
Yeah.
than 150.
So Jason Gibson, congratulations! You win a prize pack from Lunkertex, over $150 in tackle and rod gloves, by the way, and some cool Lunkertex stickers that are in there. But we got to wrap it up, and I know y'all went fishing most of the day, so
We didn't fish most of the day. We fished for about an hour.
oh,
and
y'all
15
fished for an hour and a
minutes.
half,
I'm
yeah.
going tomorrow though.
and you're
Oh, are
going
you?
tomorrow.
So I'm driving 2
I'm
hours
going tomorrow.
home.
Wait, no, I'm driving tomorrow. I'm going Thursday. Never mind.
I'm driving 2 hours home in 6 minutes from now. And then I'm getting up at the morning, driving 3 hours to Lake Lanier.
Just for fun,
Somewhat.
somewhat.
It's going to be fun.
I don't want any spotted bass, but I'll take some tuna if you get it.
Okay. Okay.
What
All
about
right.
striper?
Yep. All right. Time to wrap it up. Y'all appreciate a great show. We had a lot of viewers tonight, a lot of comments, a lot of engagement. That's what we're here for. We're here to educate and have a good time, and I think we can always do that, especially when Mr. Brian New's in the house. So, Brian, we appreciate you coming again.
Oh, thanks. It's
and-
always fun.
New York's up next for us on the Elites. You're also headed to New York next.
Yes, our
Cayuga.
next BPT event is on Lake Cayuga. I don't know if I'm pronouncing. Is that pronounced right?
Cayuga,
I
yeah,
think
close
so.
enough.
Cayuga,
I'm going to go there
Cayuga.
next week.
Yeah. Are you really?
I'm seriously considering it, yeah.
Have you ever been there?
No.
You'll have fun.
Don't say nothing about Cayuga.
I just said you'll
I'm
have
not-
fun. I didn't say nothing. But anyway, when we can't go fishing, we will sit right here and talk fish. We'll see y'all next time.
See ya.